card game locals. My name is Dan Gugar. I am here with Frank Mintmeyer as the actual Pokemon expert on the line, and we're going to bring you some very interesting decks tonight because people are getting prepped to earn some championship points or head off to Yokohama for Worlds. So, Frank, do you want to introduce yourself and tell the people why they should listen to you?
Sure. Hello, my name is Frank Mintmeyer. Most notably, I top eighted Milwaukee in 2022, playing Arceus Duraludon, one of those Dura Demons you hear all the talk about on Twitter. Additionally, this season I've had a couple good finishes. I got top 64 EUIC, and I'm just a big follower of the game.
So, Frank essentially is a master at this game. Excellent player. Deck choice is debatable, but in general, he's pretty good at this game. So today we're going to be starting with Arceus V-Star Regidrago V-Star versus Lost Zone Box with Kyogre. So, Frank, let's start with Lost Zone Box because that one's a little more well known. Can you tell us about the game plan they tend to have?
Sure. Well, since Michael's playing that Lost Zone Kyogre deck, that I'm sure many of you are familiar with from the official streams and people like Caleb Gedimer and Azul playing that deck, the deck plays for a stronger late game where you focus on in the beginning, setting up your board, thinning your deck, getting to the end game where you have your energy recyclers and mirage gates to take a big kill with Kyogre. So early in the game, Michael is probably just going to be looking to get a little bit of early aggression, take 2 to 3 prize cards, and set himself up for a Kyogre sweep at the end of the game.
Awesome. And then on Hunter's side, Hunter's playing Arceus V-Star, Regidrago V-Star, and that is also kind of a toolbox where you use Arceus V-Star to really set up, get your engine going, accelerate energy. But the really cool part is Regidrago V-Star, which for Grass, and Fire, it lets you copy any attack of any dragon Pokemon in your discard pile. So Frank, what are some of the tools that Regidrago has at hand?
So most notably, in the I believe it was Junior Division Finals at NEIC, we saw Reggie Drago V Star come playing with Goodra V Star for the Rolling Iron to reduce attacks it takes by 80 damage, which could be big in this matchup. Another key player in that finals match was Noivern EX, which stops stadiums and special energies, which was really good against that Reversal Guardy deck. And then another important attacker is going to be that Garatina V Star, which is just a strong one-shotting option that Arceus decks other than Arceus Tina V-Star don't typically have.
Absolutely. And as we're getting into the game, it looks like Hunter went first and got an Arceus via down to the bench and attached an energy. In other words, he had the perfect turn. And going over to Michael's side, Michael started with a Pokestop, and it looks like he discarded 3 energy off the Pokestop. It's not quite what he's going for.
Definitely not what he is going for. Probably looking to hit a battle VIP pass or some sort. Seeming Michael's pretty good with Lost Box. Obviously has some good finishes like a regional championship, and then placed top 8 at this past NEIC with Lost Box. So he definitely knows how to sequence, and it would seem to me that he's looking to have that Pokestop. Hopefully, would have helped him find some items such as a battle VIP pass or more Nest Ball, so that he can make a more educated decision on what to have grabbed with his existing Nest Ball. But unfortunately, it didn't look like the Pokestop played out for him.
And it looks like Michael's debating going in with Cramorant to attack. And it looks like he's probably going to use that Lost Vacuum to loss on a card from his hand and the Pokestop. So, for not playing a Colress, Michael is still going to get an attack off and put a little pressure on this Arceus, but obviously, from a long term standpoint, it's not quite what he wanted to do with this turn.
Right, yeah, this wasn't a fantastic turn. Additionally, by attacking with this Cramorant, he gets to keep his Comfeys out of harm's way. Worst case scenario, I think if I were Hunter this turn, I would be looking to, one, get a Regidrago V down, but also look to start targeting down those Comfeys, as you just saw. Your opponent had a lackluster turn 2 where they didn't even get to play a Colress. So those are just some things I'd be looking to do.
Absolutely. And it looks like Hunter has Iono in hand, which in general against Lost on Box, you kind of like having that turn 1 since they're going to Colress, fill their hand. But Michael really didn't do anything. So Hunter's got to be considering getting a research or something out of his deck to play here instead, right?
Yeah, right. I think additionally, Hunter might want to save those Ionos for later in the game, as Kyogre thrives more in the late game with being able to maintain a hand and build a hand. And if you're able to disrupt Lost Zone more in the late game, especially that Kyogre variant, you're going to have even greater success as the Arceus deck.
Absolutely. So talk a little bit about that late game combo for Kyogre. What is Michael going to try to do long term here to close out the game?
So each turn, Michael's looking to continuously thin his deck. Sometimes you'll see with Lost Box decks like the Turbo deck, they're going to try early in the game to turbo through their deck, and as they get later into the game, they're going to try and keep the resources they have available, they may be a little more stingy with when they flower select. However, with the Lost Sound Kyogre deck, you're going to be looking to flower select as many times as possible every turn in order to get to that 0 to 2 card threshold as quickly as possible.
Oh, and it looks like Hunter does decide to play Iono, and I don't love that decision. How about you, Frank?
I'm not big on it. However, maybe Hunter actually just didn't really have much going on in his hand. If he didn't have much going on in his hand, I would have liked to see him Iono before using Starbirth. But maybe he was just looking to get those 2 cards out of the deck and then see if he can find more pieces like the Regidrago V-Star or an Ultra Ball.
And that makes sense. And there's always something to be said about making sure you are playing your game and not just having your own strategy for the sake of slowing your opponent down.
Right.
But in this case, like we kind of joked at the beginning, he had an Arceus V and an attachment for turn, so the perfect turn. It really didn't need to do a ton here. And that's one of the benefits of Arceus decks is they're very low maintenance.
Right. Typically, I would say Arceus decks do have a bit of a favored Lost Box matchup, as Arceus V has a pretty high hit point threshold, so it's hard for Lost Box decks to get that turn 1 knockout. They would need a Dragonite V attack, which isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do. Additionally, as we talked about, when all they need is a turn 1 attachment, they don't need to pitch their Archeops and play a lot of cards and potentially bench a lot of Pokemon. This minimalist strategy Arceus has plays very well against a Lost Box deck, which requires on like playing for setting up your opponent's board in a checkmate position.
Absolutely. And for Hunter now, putting a second Arceus V on the board doesn't feel great because, like you mentioned with that late game Kyogre, Michael's going to try to take a 4 prize swing. And that's going to be a whole lot easier to do if Hunter gives him the opportunity to target down more 2 prizers.
Right. I'm not exactly sure if Hunter is just deciding to, I guess, net deck the juniors list or if he's playing a little bit of his own build. Some cards that he could potentially be playing could be a Sharon's Care. He could be playing Volo. He could be playing things that allow him to remove a damage 2 prize threat off the board. But I do agree, if he were to bench a second Pokemon, I think I would have preferred it to be an Arceus, or sorry, a Regidrago V, as that's another thing that could evolve and potentially chain Gudra V-Star attacks, which I think is probably your preferred Dragon type attack of choice in this matchup.
Well, it could be Gudra, but also and I think it's Covert Flight is the first attack on Noivern EX, which allows or prevents any damage done to this Pokemon by your opponent's basic Pokemon.
Oh, I didn't even know that was an attack. That's a pretty good attack in this matchup.
And that's exactly it. I think that's one of the biggest assets into Lost Box is that, for instance, Dragonite V or Cramorant or some of the other attackers like Greninja wouldn't actually be able to hit into the Regidrago V-Star if Hunter is able to get off that attack. However, looks like Dragonite may come out to party because Michael's got it down. And did you see a Mirage Gate in hand from Michael?
Considering the pace move, yes, I do see
Oh,
one. It was
yep, there
behind
it
that
is.
water energy.
So it looks like all Michael really is going to need is a switch card and then a water energy from a hand, and he's going to be able to knock out this Arceus. And that's a huge deal then because Michael goes down to the 4 prizes he needs to win the game
Hmm.
with a Kyogre attack later.
Yeah, I think the best switch card here for Michael would actually be an escape rope because you either eliminate that Regidrago V, which is the most threatening thing on the board, or the Arceus V, the only thing capable of attacking at this point. However, playing the switch card would also be nice because it would allow Michael to continue to focus on that 4 prize turn with Kyogre because it would leave the damaged Arceus.
And that was what I was going to say is I think actually taking the knockout on either the active Arceus V or the bench Regidrago are the best option because, like you were saying, Michael wants to leave that damaged Arceus V Star on the board. So that way it's an easy cleanup for Kyogre and he doesn't even need the 5 energy to take the knockout there.
The only point of concern would be if Hunter were to play some sort of V star removal such as Volo or Sharon's Care.
Yes.
However, I don't think that's a typical play. And additionally, I think with this Dragonite V attacking, Michael is going to be putting on so much pressure that Hunter isn't going to really have the time to focus on removing some of these damaged attackers off of his board.
And I see Michael getting the lost vacuum here with his V Star marker, the Forest Seal Stone. And I'm guessing that's going to come down to get rid of the Lost City. So I think I know why he's doing that. But Frank, can you tell us why he's trying to get rid of that Lost City?
Well, I think an important reason he's getting rid of that Lost City is in case his Dragonite were to get attacked and they go in the Lost Zone. Additionally, if at some point Michael does have to pre-bench Kyogre, he doesn't want that to go into the Lost Zone. And then another thing he could be doing is just trying to get to that 10 cards in the Lost Zone threshold so that his Sableye is live and he no longer has to worry about getting cards in there.
So this is why I asked you, because I actually didn't think of any of those reasons whatsoever. My reasoning was that he didn't want to lost zone the RCSV for Hunter, because then later on in the game, he would be able to Echoing Horn it back onto the board. But if he lost zones it, then there's an opportunity for Hunter to play around putting something in the discard and preventing Michael from being able to get the Echoing Horn Kyogre playoff.
Right. I guess I was looking at other positions from this board because at the way I see it, this game could end faster than getting
That's
to
a
that
fair point.
Kyogre board. But that's definitely probably one of the things that was at the front of Michael's mind was that Echoing Horn play. I guess I was just looking more into the immediate turns, as I think that Michael, despite having a lackluster turn two, has turned the tables pretty well with this Dragonite attack.
And it's a good point, and I think that's one reason why this Kyogre deck's really known to be hard to play is the general game plan, especially against Arceus decks, can be take 2 prizes and then take your sweet time getting to the 4 prize turn. But you also have the capability with the Mirage Gates, with the Dragonite V, to accelerate the game and make it a quick one and try to
Mm.
take your 6 prizes rather rapidly. So for Michael here, with this kind of slow start, which do you think is the right course? Because now Hunter's likely not going to be able to take the knockout on this Dragonite. So where do you think Michael does try to go from here?
Well, I think, like you said, this Dragonite is going to go relatively unchecked. It's just going to get hit for 180. So if I'm Michael, I think taking the two prize knockout onto this Arceus would be fantastic. Taking basically just taking two prizes here would be fantastic, or damaging this Regidrago V. The important thing is just attack with Dragonite because getting
Absolutely.
the damage on the board opens up possibilities for Sableye to take a two prize knockout, opens up possibilities for him to not have to have 5 energies for a Kyogre. So basically, at this point, I think Michaels is trying to make the Kyogre play as easy as possible, whether that's by right now it's a 4, still a 5 energy attack from Kyogre because he's going to have to Echoing Horn, likely that Arceus, and the next lowest HP Pokemon is 220 after that
Absolutely.
Arceus. So I think this turn he could either just take this knockout on the Arceus, forcing 1/5 energy swing, or he could look to damage another attacker. There's a lot of possibilities, but I think it's really just going to depend on what Michael think is the best way to play.
For sure. And I'm just curious, why do you think he benched the Mana Fee? Oh, for another one of the dragon attackers. In Hunter's deck, Regidrago has access to Garchomp V, which has an attack that for 3 water and a fighting, or 2 water, a fighting, and a colorless, allows them to do 220 damage to any Pokemon on the board, which really can't help when he puts Manaphy down, but Michael may have been trying to play around a Gust knockout, or excuse me, a Snipe knockout on Dragonite V or something like that. But it looks like Michael goes down to 2 prizes remaining, and Hunter still has 5 to take. And granted, he's probably going to take a couple prizes right here on the Dragonite, but I'm not sure why he advanced that one.
He might just have the Drago. He top decked the Drago V Star, but he already had the fire in hand, so I think maybe he just was anticipating he'd play those cards down. Not that it really matters. It could show your play, but since there is no turn interaction between these two decks, really, it's going to be fine for Hunter to have done this.
Well, I think the other issue is there's no Dragon Pokemon in Hunter's discard. So the primary attack from Regidrago V-Star only lets you use the attacks of Dragon Pokemon in the discard, though it looks like he may have just discarded a Hisuian Gudra right there.
That's the Gudra. Someone in the chat said to read Regidrago V, so I'm reading Regidrago V.
I believe Regidrago V has a 130 Snipe 30 attack,
Yes.
as well as look at the top 3 cards of your deck and discard. Discard all 3, attach
Yes.
any basic energy. But in this case, being able to use Gudra V-Star there is a big deal because
Mm-hmm.
now that Regidrago V-Star is taking 80 less damage.
Right. Yep. So one thing to note on Michael's Lost Zone is I believe there's now 2 Mirage Gate in there.
Yes.
Additionally, he's already played one for that Dragonite, leaving him with 1 Mirage Gate left to do this Kyogre play, which could mean one of 2 things. It could mean, one, he decided that the Kyogre play is not worth it and that he should just be going on the aggressive, or 2, he's realized that all he needs is that 1 Mirage Gate left. Maybe he knows he has the resources left to allow him to just use that 1 Mirage Gate, has plenty of switching cards. Uh, but we're gonna have to see. Just because Michael's at 2 prizes here doesn't really mean he's in the clear because he still has to get the 5 energy attack regardless. So ideally, this turn he could be a Sableye turn. I can't remember how much HP Regidrago has, so I don't.
Regidrago has 270 HP, and
270.
it looks like
Gotcha.
Michael had lost zone 1 Sableye, and he may have another one in this Colress.
Yeah, I think this turn, ideally, Michael would be using Sableye, as any other attacker will just do less damage due to that Goodra V-Star, as Sableye does go through Goodra V-Star. So maybe these
Exactly.
next two turns, as long as there's no Lost City that comes into play on Hunter's following turn, Michael could be looking to use Sableye's Lost Mine to put both of these Regidrago V-Stars at the, I believe it's 3 energy Kyogre threshold.
Ooh. And it looks like Michael's deciding to get rid of the Kyogre and just saying, you know what? Kind of like you were saying, Frank, I'm going to take my last two prizes on these two Regidrago V-Star.
Yeah, I like this play a lot because now that Michael this turn can use Sableye to set up damage on both these Regidrago, all it takes for Michael is one escape rope to gust and reset this Goodra V-Star, and then attack with Dragonite to knock out either Regidrago V-Star. So really, this means that he needs even less, I guess, in order to take the game. He doesn't need to thin his deck. He doesn't need to have all energy set for the Kyogre. He can bench a Dragonite, something that is in less danger of getting knocked out, something that's more powerful, and kind of play a game less prone to Iono as well.
Absolutely. And that's been one of the big touted advantages of the Kyogre deck is that you don't have to go down to four prizes, two prizes, one prize. You can get to four and then just do a one big swing turn
Right.
and protect your hand with it. However, Michael obviously is in this situation where he's been able to take prizes a little more aggressively. I don't think he's too sad about it. I think he's fine with it.
Right, no, I think this just made the game a lot easier for Michael. He doesn't have to go for the Kyogre play. You don't want to force yourself in a Kyogre as the Kyogre deck, because then one awkward loss zone off of Flower Selecting or Colress, or an awkward draw off of an Iono, and then you're just behind. So
Absolutely.
being able to take the advantage in this game and go on the aggressive has just given Michael a number of turns to get to a position where he can set up a variety of ways to take the game.
Absolutely. And it looks like Hunter is going to be able to draw four with this Serena. So at least he's getting into a couple cards here, which is good. But not being able to disrupt Michael's hand may be problematic since he's really just pulling his whole deck into his hand.
Right. Another thing I didn't see was I didn't see access to a Lost City. So I'm not sure
Yes.
if Michael is playing Clara or if he's just playing a lot of super odds. But another play Michael could now go for, assuming that the Sableye doesn't get magically lost zoned, is he could just recover the Sableye for another attack or two and just lost mine over and over again. So now he's got two potential ways to take the game if no Lost City comes down.
So I'm curious too. It looked like Hunter kept a card in his hand rather than Serena weighing three to draw five total. And I wonder what he was protecting because I'm not sure what else you would want except for, like you said, Frank, another Lost City to get rid of that Sableye.
Yeah, I didn't really get a good look at the existing cards in his hand prior to the Serena. I just do know that the three cards played, the Ultra Ball and those two Pokemon, were three of the cards he drew off Serena. So it'd be nice to see what that last card was. I feel like once I saw it, my memory would be refreshed, and then we could figure out what that last card is.
Your memory's probably better than mine because I don't know if I would know even looking at it. But it looks like Hunter does take the Noivern EX off the deck there, or off the deck search. And like you mentioned, Noivern EX is two attacks. One for Psychic, Dark, Colorless. It does 140 and prevents any special energy from being attached or stadiums being played. And then another one for 70, it does 70 for two colorless that says prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's basic Pokemon. So if you had been able to use that here to take a knockout on the Sableye, then this Dragonite V would not have been able to finish off the active Regidrago V Star. However, Michael may be able to get the Escape Rope Mirage Gate to the Dragonite play to knock out the bench Regidrago V Star. And that would be the game right there, but
Right.
also would be a big combo for Michael.
Yeah, I mean, just the Super Rod recovered Dragonite and two Waters. I think Michael already has two Lightning in his hand. So I think off this Colress, he's just looking to get some of the pieces. I would assume he wouldn't put back all those Waters without knowing he has another way to
Ooh.
recover.
Well, it looks like he did get the Dragonite and got rid of two Battle VIP, which is easy.
And the Greninja.
So he has the Dragonite, he has the Mirage Gate, and he has the Lightning Energy. So the question is just, can he find the Escape Rope?
I think he's got it.
Does he
Actually,
have the rope in hand?
I don't know if I saw the escape rope or not.
And I think that's really the big deal because right now, hitting into the, well, actually, hold on, 90. So he would be, I believe, 10 damage short of knocking out this active Regidrago if
Yeah.
he hit into it with the Dragonite. And unfortunately, if he benches a Dragonite and doesn't take a knockout, it's probably going to be pretty easy for Hunter to reach for the knockout and win the game.
Right. I think right now Michael's debating how much he wants to dig for it this turn, or if he's able to make himself Iono proof and play a safe turn this turn. He hasn't used Greninja, so I think he should at least conceal cards away this lightning energy. I saw he has an energy recycler in his hand, so
Well, he can't use Greninja currently because the path to the peak is
oh.
down, unless he's able to bounce it.
Oh yeah, I didn't see that.
Oh, so it looks like actually he does have the gate in hand, does not have the escape rope from what I could tell. And because I think he drew into too many lightning energy, he's not actually going to be able to Mirage Gate this turn. So now for
Yeah.
Hunter, if Hunter gets the Giratina V-Star in the discard and gets the Gust, then Hunter could just win the game. But we'll see what happens here, because the other thing Hunter could do to really put himself in a good position is to play an Iono and just put Michael's hand to almost nothing.
Right. I think Michael felt safe benching the Dragonite as he just saw Hunter play a Serena to draw, giving himself one less gust out. And then looking at Hunter's hand, I don't think I see any supporter of any kind. I think I
Yes,
see a lot of Pokemon.
a lot of Pokemon, at least one capturing Aroma. So I'm curious what Hunter's play is here. On the bright side for Hunter, Dragonite V still can't knock out the active if he uses Gudra's attack again. So the question just is, do you just hit and hope that, and that is the answer to the question, just hit, hope that Michael doesn't hit the rope, gate, Dragonite combo. But Michael's well on his way there, and you're right, I do see the rope in hand. So now I think Michael's just digging for a path bounce. And I don't know if he hit it.
I think there's a Pokestop and a number of switch cards there. Since Michael had the Mirage Gate in hand, I would have liked to have seen a Mirage Gate for that one energy. Maybe he, over the course of the game, forgot like what the resources he had left in his deck. But I would have liked to see a Mirage Gate because since he has the water, he would have been able to attach his lightning energy. And then if he knew, he would have known that he has access to a number of switch cards and the ability to see his whole deck.
Oh, he almost got rid of the Mirage Gate there, or excuse me, the Pokestop, which would have
Yeah.
been aggressive. So so I think you're right there. He does get rid of the Pokestop. Interesting. So then,
Oh, the one thing we're missing is I don't think he has access to escape rope. I think that's the one thing we've been missing.
does he not? Okay, I thought he had an escape rope in hand, but I may have been missing it. So let's see what the prizes are. It looks like
To escape rope.
no
Yeah,
way.
that's
They are both of his escape ropes. So Michael's got to be trying to figure out a way out of this.
yeah. The one thing I was thinking about as he was playing through his turns, I'm like, why has he not just slammed the game down yet? And then I
Right.
realized he doesn't have an escape rope in his deck.
Oh my goodness. That is heartbreaking for Michael because he had this game in hand.
Yeah, so I don't know what the best, if any, route there is for Michael to take now. Being down, I would say being down the Kyogre kind of stinks right now, but I don't even know if he would have had the resources to attack with Kyogre. So I think it really just came down to he had to hope that off of the 4 prizes he's taken that at least one of them was an escape rope.
Well, and I think what Michael has to do here is just hit into the Regidrago V-Star
Right.
with Dragonite and hope that Hunter isn't able to take a knockout through a boss, his own rope, or getting a Giratina V into the
Mhm.
discard. Or, excuse me, Giratina V-Star.
Well, I mean, we've seen Hunter pitch a lot of resources that could uh, contribute to him getting that knockout. So this is a play with a high chance of success for Michael. I don't even know what Hunter's hand is really. We know he has the capturing Roma. We know he has some Pokemon, one of them being Noivern EX. But I don't really know like the real specifics of his hand. But I mean, this is the final turn base of the game basically. So I guess he's gonna show us.
Well, also, funnily enough, if Hunter doesn't win the game here, we're actually going to sudden death. Because
Oh
Michael will
right.
have, Michael should have 60 damage on that Manaphy. So if Hunter doesn't win the game right now, we're probably going to have to let him know that that Manaphy's getting knocked out during the next turn if Michael attacks with Dragonite. And I'm curious to see if he will, because he doesn't really have another attacker on board. Cramorant's in the Lost Zone. So I'm curious to see what happens here.
Me too. I don't know if Michael has access to a Super Rod. If he had access to a Super Rod, he could attack with Sableye to avoid sudden death. But I guess we're gonna have to find out because we might have to go hurry over.
This
And
is and this is I don't mind this move by Hunter just to get the active out of the way because clearly Michael didn't have the escape rope last turn.
right,
And so Hunter's got to be thinking there's no gust available because otherwise Michael would have used that too.
One thing I'm thinking about right now is obviously Michael has to play to his outs, and his out may have just been the fact that Hunter doesn't retreat. But I feel like Michael's a good enough player to have realized Hunter could just retreat and attack, and this would just delay his loss one more turn. So I'm beginning to think that Michael does have out to Sableye.
Do you? Oh, he does have one Super Rod available, but he did get rid of the nest balls off of the last Comfy. So it depends if he has another search out for a basic.
Right.
All right, so let's see what Hunter does here. And now I'm curious if Hunter's going to use Gudra, and I wonder why Hunter didn't use Covert Flight.
All
Oh, but it
right.
looks like we may see the Sableye play here if Michael has an out. Just going to put the Sableye into the deck, and we are shuffling the deck. All right.
I mean, he has switching cards in hand, so he might go retreat and flower select and hope he has a 66% chance, something
Yes.
like that. I think that's the right math.
Well, he can't conceal cards still because there is a path to the peak on board, and he did discard his last. What am I trying to say here? He did discard his last Pokestop.
Yeah. Just to make note, Gabe or Smart TCG, we do know they has to put the damage on the mana fee. I guess we're
Yes.
kind of just waiting to see if it has an impact on the game.
And it does not. Michael is able to take the last knockout with Sableye and win the game. Arc Regidrago put up a decent fight there, but it's possible that Lost Zone's a bit of a higher tier deck than Regidrago at this point.
Right. I think just to kind of look at that game a little bit more, Michael had such a great start. Despite having that mediocre turn one, he was able to get to that, I believe, 10 cards in the Lost Zone on turn two, attack with Dragonite, take a knockout, and then he was able to take another knockout. And the game almost fell out of his hands due to the lack of escape rope because they were in the prizes. But he kept all the resources he needed, just barely enough resources to win that game, which is what it always feels like against Lost Box.
Absolutely. And I think Hunter didn't do anything especially incorrectly, but it did seem like he overbenched a little bit and
Hmm.
put down guys that he didn't quite need to, where if he had kept his bench maybe a little more slim, it could be a little harder for Michael to maybe make the plays he needed to. And if Michael didn't have both escape ropes prized, Michael could have absolutely won that game
Right.
more than a turn earlier.
And I think that could come from experience in the matchup. Uh, the Arceus versus Lost Box matchup is one that has a lot riding on the draws of the Lost Box player, but there's a lot the Arceus player can do to make the draws of the Lost Box player that much more important. For instance, as we talked about with the benching, with sequencing, like Iono disruption, there are a lot of things that the Arceus player can do to just make the game a lot harder and do what Arceus does best.
Absolutely. And so, coming out of this game, we are going to jump over to advertising. To advertising. Yes, the secret of the Schwartz, merchandising. Anyway, here at Nerd Rage Gaming, we are absolutely happy to take some Pokemon cards off your hands. We love buying any singles. If you have any bulk, single stuff you want to get rid of, we would love to take it. We're trying to build our stock and trying to become a place where you can get the cards you need to keep playing, competing, and building that wild deck you want to. And along with that, we have plenty of sealed product to sell you with Paldea Evolved, some older sets, some promo sets, stuff that may be a little harder to find out in the world. So if you're looking for some good Pokemon TCG product, come down to Nerd Rage Gaming. We'd love to have you here. And then after that, we're going to take a quick break here before we get into our next round. But thanks for hanging with us. Welcome back, everyone, to Nerd Rage Gaming local Pokemon TCG locals? Locals. Anyway, here we go. We have Martin P playing the deck that absolutely was the reason why I picked him to be on stream, Meowscarada EX. And playing against him, we have Brian Yerger, who's an awesome local player, runs tournaments in the area. Great to have him as a part of the community. And he is playing Arceus Pile. And by Arceus Pile, I mean, he told me what it was playing with Arceus, and it was a bunch of things, and I wasn't about to type that out. So we're going to see how Arceus Pile does against the big, scary grass kitty. So, Frank, do you know what Masquerada does?
I just read what Meowscarada does, so
Excellent.
now I know what Meowscarada does.
Can you tell the class what Masquerada is trying to do, especially into an Arceus deck?
All right, well, first, Meowscarada's ability is pretty good. Discard Grass Energy and put 3 damage counters on of any Pokemon, which is pretty good, especially because Meowscarada's attack does, I I forgot now. I think it's 100 plus 100 if you remove an energy or something like that.
Right. So, Meowscarada, the ability does, if you discard a grass energy from your hand, you place 30 damage counters on one of your opponent's bench Pokemon.
Oh, bench.
And
Okay.
the attack is 100 base for 2 colorless. And like you said, if there's any damage counters, does 120 more.
All right. So now that I remembered what the card does.
It's a team effort here, Frank. Don't
Right.
worry.
Uh, the way Martin's deck is likely going to work in a matchup like this is Martin's going to look to accumulate a combination of two, I believe it's called Flower Banquet abilities onto an Arceus, and then attack it for 200, putting it at 260, and then use that Metacham V Yoga Loop, what's in the active, to knock it out and take an extra turn, and then continue to set up his board.
Absolutely. And especially with Brian putting down multiple little beavery bros, Martin's not even going to need to just go after the big 2 prizers. He's going to be able to use that yoga loop on a small beaver or something like that to take 1 prize for the turn. But like you said, then he can come back and take another turn and take a big knockout and basically map out his prizes in a way where he doesn't need to just go through the big tanks that Brian's going to try to throw up.
Right. I think another thing, I'm not sure which, I don't even know if there is a typical list for Meowscarada, but I've seen some that play Arceus V-Star, which could be a big help in allowing Martin to set up. I'm also not even sure what attackers Brian is playing on his side, as we've only seen a pair of Bidoof and that Arceus V, so I guess we're going to be learning a little bit about their decks and this matchup as we go.
So we did see, at least briefly, when Brian was shuffling, that there was a Pikachu or Flying Pikachu VMAX, and we have seen both Grass and Psychic Energy. So it looks like we're at least seeing a Giratina V-Star and then a Flying Pikachu VMAX, which it's an interesting combination. And honestly, I can't say either of those are perfectly helpful in this matchup, unfortunately for Brian.
Right. Last week rather, we saw Kevin playing Arceus Giratina V-Star, Umbreon VMAX. Obviously slightly different. You have Dark Signal as opposed to Flying Pikachu's, Max Balloon.
Yes.
So different uses in different matchups. Umbreon's better against Gardevoir. Pikachu's better against decks like Lost Box or Chien-Pao, aka big basic attackers. In this matchup, neither Umbreon nor Pikachu VMAX really have much strength at all. So Brian's probably looking to use more so of Arceus V-Star and Giratina V-Star in this matchup, as Giratina V-Star can do a whopping 280, knock out an Arceus, and I believe get close to knocking out a Meowscarada EX.
I am interested by that decision. It looks like Martin just passed. But does he have an Arceus V-Star in hand? Because I believe I saw a Professor's Research in hand, so whatever that other card must be a real good one.
Yeah, it's got to be a really good card. Maybe, I didn't really get a good look at Martin's hand. He did get the attachment onto the Sprigatito, so that's a pretty good start. Maybe he's sitting on a card that helps to evolve that Sprigatito. Maybe he has a barrel. Maybe he just, we don't really know his list, so maybe it's a resource he only has access to one of, and he can play it on the following turn.
Absolutely. And it does look like, though, like you mentioned, some are playing the Arceus V-Star, and it looks like Martin does have that in his deck. And Arceus V-Star, it's really not in there as an attacker, although you can attack with it.
Right.
But it's in there for that Starbirth ability to help him get to that rare candy, big grass kitty combo. And on Brian's side, Brian got the perfect turn 1, Arceus attach, and turn 2, he's got the Arceus V-Star, and he's searching for a couple cards. And I'm curious with this one, especially knowing he had discarded an energy last turn, why he didn't play the Iono in hand and then go in with V-Star after that. But it looks like he may be taking the knockout on the Sprigatito, which I don't mind that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe he, like you said, was electing to go for a boss's orders instead. Something we saw last round 2 was a preemptive Starbirth, where they then play their supporter after. Just to give a little, probably just I guess a tidbit. Typically in Arceus decks, when you're playing, when you know you're going to use Starbirth and you have another supporter in your hand, something Arceus players typically fall into a trap of doing is trying to disrupt the board on their opponent too much, or they try to telegraph their plays too much. One of the biggest strengths of Arceus that people should play more towards is the versatility of Starbirth and how you could play this Iono, especially if Brian knew he was going to play this Iono because he wanted to progress his board and find another attacker to load up with Trinity Nova. He can use Iono, see the 6 cards. He may have grabbed the escape robe off of those 6 cards on the Iono. He may have gotten the basic energy that he just attached. There are a lot of things he could have gotten off the Iono, which would have impacted the Starbirth.
And I think that's such a big deal about sequencing. Because sequencing, it can seem kind of basic, like, well, yeah, like you attach before you attack, whatever, stuff like that. But this is where it can be a big deal because, like you said, Brian missed an opportunity to set up a different attacker. Because right now, he only has his Arceus V Star. And granted, it's probably not in any danger of going down in this scenario,
Right.
but Brian had an opportunity to significantly advance his board. And because he used his Starbirth early, he wasn't able to do so.
Right.
And long term, that could be very problematic for him because he's going to be exposing a lot of basic Vs on the bench that Martin may be able to take advantage of.
Right. One thing I was just about to comment on that you were alluding to is that next turn, if Brian were to potentially bench a Giratina V, if Martin is able to set up this turn, get a Meowscarada EX, get some grass energies in his hand, maybe a boss's orders, Martin can just knock out the Giratina V when it comes down next turn. And then he's just dealing with an Arceus V in the active again, which is far less threatening than something that can deal a whopping 280 damage.
Absolutely. And I think this is what Martin's deck kind of banks on is you take advantage of the lower HP, multi-prizers like the Arceus V and Giratina V that Brian just drew off of that Iono. And we do see a Florigato come down, not a Meowscarada.
I'm not seeing much of anything, to be honest, in Martin's hand. I don't see an RCS V Star out. I see a supporter and I see a Meowscarada EX, but I don't actually see anything to capitalize upon Brian's mediocre turn 2.
And that's disappointing because now Martin didn't really advance his board too much, and he is going to give up 2 prizes to Brian on this next turn. But if he's able to get the Meowscarada Grass Energy boss combo this upcoming turn, he's still going to take 2 prizes and be right back in the game.
Right.
And the issue that Brian has is there's nothing in his deck that can one-shot a Meowscarada EX.
Right. One thing to know, we say Martin didn't progress his board. He doesn't need a rare candy, so RCS is slightly less important for
Very true.
this following turn, which is important. But he obviously didn't get an attack off. He didn't pressure Brian's board, so Brian just going bench attack is all he really needs this turn.
Right. And it looks like, though, Martin does top deck the Meowscarada, which is a big deal. So we are hoping to see from Martin's end, and let's be clear, I'm pretty biased. I want to see Meowscarada win here. Martin's hoping to see is a Grass Energy and a Gust, if possible.
Right.
But if not, just a Grass Energy at some point, and then Alakazam to move damage to the active to then hit for a big hit,
Right.
plus setting up another Sprigatito. Martin could still put himself back into a winning position here.
I don't quite remember. Does Alakazam say only damage on your opponent's side of the board?
Yes.
Okay.
That would be so good if you could move it from your own.
That's what I thought. There are some cards that have had those types of interactions, so I just want to make sure I was reading that card correctly. So yeah, like you said, looking at this turn, a Grass Energy would be nice. I know Martin has Iono in his hand, or at least I'm pretty sure I saw Iono. So he will be able to see some more cards. Should find a Grass Energy.
Did he just fail the Artisan, though?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, wow. So does he only have 2 Sprigatito available to him this game? Because that could make things a little scarier.
He could just be playing a 3-1-3 line as opposed to, or not only playing 3 Sprigatito and then some other form of evolution line. Because, like I said, we're not very sure of his list. There's a lot of things he could be or could not be running.
Absolutely.
But yeah, regardless, only having 2 Sprigatito or potentially Meowscarada is definitely not ideal.
And it looks like he did indicate towards his prizes that, yeah, there's some in there I don't like. But he does also look like he got the rare candy Meowscarada off of that draw, but I don't see any Grass Energy, and that feels like a killer for Martin right now.
Yeah, he's definitely not. I don't even think there was Meowscarada. That card, I can't even tell. He has so many shiny cards that I'm not familiar with, so it's hard to identify. But yeah, this is definitely not going exactly the way Martin wants it to go.
No, and Martin's advantage he does have here is Brian's not going to take 2 prizes with this. Well, I say that, and there is a choice belt in that hand that he declines.
Well, choice belt's only to GXs and Vs.
Well, so it is. However, he could attach it to the active and then squirrel to try to find a boss's orders. And this is where I'm a little confused because that line puts Brian right back in this game. Granted, it was Grass Energy, so really nothing going on there. But Brian does have an opportunity to still stay on top of things if he just continues to apply pressure. But for Martin knows Brian's hand's pretty much brick. So if he prevents any prizes to be taken, if he's able to switch in between Meowscarada, he could still be in this game.
Right. There's one. If I'm Martin again, I keep saying over and over again we don't know his list because I don't know what outs he can play to. If there were a choice spell in Martin's deck, a knockout on this RCSV would be huge, as it would leave Brian with 2 Giratina V, which, unless Brian top decks slash draws off of Nest Dash from uh, the Squovit, he's only going to be attacking with a basic V that can be knocked out through a combination of the Meowscarada ability plus Radiant Alakazam. So Martin definitely has a huge opportunity this turn to put himself back in this game.
And I think Martin has an opportunity, regardless even of taking a knockout, because he could set up a play where he's able to take a 4 prizes back to back and remove all of Brian's attackers from the board. And just bear with me here, Frank. So Martin decides to Alakazam 2 damage from the Arceus to the bench Giratina. After that, Martin decides to hit into the Arceus for 200 damage, putting it at 260. Next turn, Brian takes a knockout. Martin is sad. This is fine. Martin goes up, Yoga loops the active Arceus while setting up another Meowscarada, and then Gus knocks out the Giratina V with the remaining Meowscarada, and uses that to then close out Brian's game, where even if he has more prizes, Brian has no attackers. I also see Martin discard a Sprigatito, and I'm not sure what that's all about. Any ideas here?
Nope, zero ideas.
All right. Excellent. We are on the same page, Frank. It looks like then he was saving the bench space for Arceus, but at this point, I feel like you almost just want another Meowscarada instead.
Yeah, I think I would be valuing Meowscarada for not as an attacker anymore, but for that ability.
Yes.
Because at this point in the game, you have your Meowscarada in the active, which is 2 prizes for your opponent. You have a Medicham V on the bench, which is 2 prizes for your opponent. And you have, hopefully, another Meowscarada EX in that Sprigatito for 2 prizes for your opponent. There are 6 prizes on the board already, and your opponent only needs to take 4. So I wouldn't be trying to power up an Arceus that you really don't even want to attack with. The only merit I could see is he still doesn't use Starbirth. So
Yes.
maybe he is heavily valuing Starbirth, as we've already seen. This game is not exactly going down the path Martin wants to go. And a Starbirth could bring him back into the game by allowing him to hit a precise combo. As we've mentioned time and time again, he is still in the game. There are still a number of ways he can get back through damage manipulation and setting up big prize swings. So it's not, maybe it isn't wrong for him to value the Arceus V-Star more than another Sprigatito.
And it's a good point. Maybe he is setting out a longer term game plan. And to be honest, Brian
Wait,
going.
sorry to interrupt. If that was Arceus was at 80 damage, and then he just attacked for 200 minus 80, shouldn't it live? Shouldn't it be on 20 damage?
No, so it does 100 damage base for Meowscarada plus 120.
Oh, okay, okay,
And
okay,
so
okay,
the
okay.
double turbo eliminates that bonus
Gotcha.
20.
I
And
thought it was 100 plus 100, so I see.
Brian just squirreled into the barrel, and that
Yeah.
is a huge deal.
Yeah, that is clutch.
Because now that means that there is that a Raihan right
That's a
there?
Raihan too.
Oh man. So that's a huge swing because Martin's game plan unfortunately hinged on Brian not being able to get the guys out to continue to attack and apply pressure. And so I'm curious what Brian gets off of this Raihan. I'm not gonna lie to you, Frank. I don't know much. I love that decision right there.
I think Brian's a little fearful of removing some energies off of this active Giratina V-Star with that lost impact, and he sees the knockout, the current knockout already with whatever the second attack is, Shred, I think it is, on
Yes.
Giratina V. Maybe he doesn't have another energy attachment in his hand, which is also why he's afraid of using that lost impact attack. But this gives Martin a very good window to do the plays we were talking about. He could take a 2 prize swing. He could even set up Yoga Loop plays on this Squovit. There's a lot of things he could do this turn.
Absolutely. And it looks like he has a rare candy in hand. Unfortunately, not a ton to go along with it. So we're going to see if he's able to draw into what he needs here. With the Barrel on the board, that Iono is going to unfortunately be a lot less impactful. But still, Martin has a chance to take a Yoga Loop prize on the Squirrel, knock out the Giratina V active with a Meowscarada EX. And at that point, Brian's going to have to get the boss to take the knockout.
Right. I mean, with that, obviously, with that Babero in play, he is considerably more likely to find access to boss. I don't think we've even seen Brian play a boss this game. So if he's playing the typical 4 boss that Arceus Giratina decks play, or if he's even just playing 3, I would say he does have pretty high odds of finding it.
I would agree. And it looks like Martin does get the Arceus V Star, but I'm curious what else he has in his hand. Since with Ionoing himself to 4, he's only going to have 1 card remaining. And I'm curious to see. I think Brian's asking if Martin used the Artisan or not, and it looks like Martin is declining to do so. So, what do you think Martin does go with here?
I think we gotta use Bibarel first and see what the 4 cards we get are.
Good point. And actually, talking about sequencing, Martin's sequencing this the right way. Draw with Barrel and then decide what you
Right.
need to do with Arceus. I can't quite see if he got anything too good there, though.
Yeah, there were a lot of good cards to get off of that Bibarel, but I don't think he got any of them. Some important cards he was probably looking for were Grass Energies, Meowscarada EX, Rare Candy.
Well, I think, honestly, you just hit it right there. Those are the 3 pieces he needs. He needs a Meowscarada EX, a Grass Energy, and a Rare Candy. And if he gets those 3, he is right back in this game.
Right.
Because all you do is Alakazam 2 Energy off the Squirrel to the active Giratina V, use Meowscarada's ability on the Squirrel, Yoga Loop the Squirrel, go in with Meowscarada EX, and take a knockout on the Giratina V, and suddenly you're 1 prize away. And the alternate plan, though, is to knock out the Squirrel with Yoga Loop, and then Gust knock out the Barrel next turn, and say, good luck to my opponent. You have to have the Gust knockout in hand with the Giratina V Star. So it looks like we do see the Meowscarada. We are going to see the damage go from the Squirrel to the Giratina V Star. Are we going to see the Yoga Loop play here?
If he doesn't have access to the Grass Energy, I don't know if there's probably one to say.
Yeah,
if he's
there.
doing this,
All right.
yes.
We are going to see the Yoga Loop play. So Martin has found a way to bring himself back into this game after a very slow start. So now we'll see what he goes with in his game plan here, getting to take another turn. So, Frank, if you're Martin right here, what do you think your plan is for this turn?
I think I would rather see Martin take a 2 prize knockout. Yes. Well, I don't know the counts in his list, but killing Bibarel could be good. Killing Bibarel requires a boss, requires a lot. I feel like a lot more pieces, but I really don't know what Martin's hand is at the moment. So killing this Bibarel could be good because then it forces Brian to have it in the 2 cards you draw if Iono plus draw for turn to get boss. But I think it's a lot harder after this turn for Martin to be able to kill this active Giratina V, as I feel like this Giratina V will probably go to the bench. But not really sure.
And it's a good point. And I think that is really the question here of how do you make Brian's life as hard as possible to win this game since you're still in a disadvantageous position. And I believe Martin does have a double turbo on that that Meowscarada, correct?
Yeah, there's one. It's just buried under. He's like to stack his cards, I guess, on top of each other, pile them up. But
which is fine. So then Martin takes a knockout and goes down to 1 prize remaining.
right.
He is well within range to win this game. And now Brian really just needs a gust to take the game himself.
Yeah, I think this is actually the more reliable route for Martin to take, as it requires less pieces the following turn to win the game. He would need a lot both this turn, this previous turn, and the next turn in order to win by killing the Bibarel. But this way he forces himself to just need a boss. The unfortunate part is that it means that Brian can win with a boss, but he has the ability to draw up to 10 cards, because I believe he just drew an Ultra Ball.
So he did, but he unfortunately decided to attach a double turbo energy to the barrel on the bench rather than Ultra Ball for the second barrel at the start. So we'll see what Brian decides to go with here. He may just draw off the first barrel and then go for another Ultra Ball.
Yeah.
And I assume, based on the fact that he didn't immediately Ultra Ball there, he doesn't play anything like Lumineon.
Yeah. I mean, if Brian doesn't have a lot of playable cards left in his deck, I could see the reason to hold this Ultra Ball. And looking through his deck, I didn't see very many cards that you can kind of just put down and continue to draw. So he could be saying, I'm going to draw 3 cards here, then I'm going to Ultra Ball and draw 3 more cards, and that way I'm going to see 6 as opposed to 5.
That's a fair point.
It's just a matter of like comfortability from testing and how well you know your deck and the ability to find playable cards.
Absolutely. And it looks like Brian did not draw the boss, did draw another Ultra Ball or two. One thing to note too, just again, Brian's a good player, but I always want to note this. There was a baby Spiritomb in Brian's deck, and he declined to get it with Artisan. And for me, that just seems like a kind of simple one of just thin
Mm.
stuff out of your deck, put it on the board, because having that Spiritomb hit the deck doesn't really change the prize map for Martin. Unless, of course, Brian isn't able to evolve this barrel.
Yep. Looking at Brian is thinning more and more. Like you said, we could have thinned the Spiritomb. Another play I would have liked to see him do is Ultra Ball, discard V-Guard and any other card in his hand except that second Ultra Ball to grab a Pokemon, and then Ultra Ball away that Pokemon and the remaining card in his hand for Barrel to draw 5. Because now
Absolutely.
Brian is seeing 6 cards as opposed to 8.
Or even
So
the 10 he could have.
even the 10 he could have, well, the 10 he could have would have been reliant upon the 5 he drew
Well, and
off of the first Barrel.
here's another one with that Palpad in hand. Oh, so Brian is just declining to go for the win this turn and instead saying that he's going to win next turn. And that's an aggressive decision. What do you think about that play here?
Yeah, as they say in some movie, it's a bold move, Cotton.
That is indeed a bold move, Cotton.
I don't really know. Again, I don't know Martin's list, but I would say that he definitely plays at least 2 boss in his deck, considering this deck seems like one where you want to be able to pick off things as you choose.
Yes.
Path to Peak doesn't really matter. So I would say that Martin actually has a pretty high odds, unless all the boss were in his hand prior to that Iono. I would say that he does have pretty high odds of.
Well, actually, that path to the peak's a very big deal because it prevents Martin from being able to use Flower Bouquet on
Oh,
the
right.
barrel and then Alakazam to bring it up to the active.
I
But
forgot about the damage thing. Ugh.
yes, however, it's really going to depend on what Martin gets here. The one advantage Martin has as well is Brian could just be out of switching cards, in which case Martin could gust up a barrel and just hit it for 100
Mm-hmm.
and just say, you know what, this is what I got, and you're gonna have to find that switch out off of the possible 10 cards you can see.
Yeah, I like that play a lot.
We'll see if Martin goes for it. We'll
I
see.
see Rare Candy, Meowscarada, Heavy Ball, and then 2 other cards I can't figure out.
Not a lot of what you're hoping for here,
Right.
unfortunately. And also, unfortunately for Martin, he's not able to go well. I'm kind of curious because he could always just go into Alakazam here if he has a switching card. But it looks like he's just attacking into the Giratina and kind of accepting the loss here almost, since Brian's just going to be able to attack right back. Is there something I'm missing here, Frank?
No, I don't think so. I think the one play Martin could go for is he could have retreated into, I guess, the Alakazam. Hope that Brian takes the bait and attacks into it. Give himself another turn to thin out his hand and Barrel again, and try and draw basic energy boss to attack with Arceus. Uh, I just think that barrel he drew was really bad. I think it was 5 actually unplayable cards aside from Heavy Ball, so 4 unplayable cards. So I don't think there was much he could do with that hand. And just, I mean, when you have such a rough game and a lot of the lines you were looking for get taken away by Path and Iono, I think sometimes you find it hard to find a way out.
Absolutely. And Brian, it looked like, did actually have a switch in hand as well off
Mhm.
of his top deck. So even if Martin had gone with the Gust play, it would not have been able to be enough to get around that because he was out of Artisan and Stadium bounces. So a close game. Grass Kitty, unfortunately, did not pull it out against Arceus Giratina, but unfortunately, it just seemed not quite a fast enough start to really keep pace, even though Brian didn't have the most efficient start himself.
Right. I would say that obviously we say Brian didn't have an efficient start. He was still putting on pressure.
Very true.
And Martin had Martin drawn better, the pressure Brian was putting on would have been negligible, but unfortunately Martin did not see Meowscarada for a lot of the game. Didn't even get to make use of the Arceus V put down. So a lot of things I just think that didn't necessarily go his way.
And that's a very good point. Martin was not able to counter enough because Brian did get the turn 2 attack with Arceus V-Star, and that's about all you can hope for. He just wasn't able to really stabilize what he needed to on the board outside of that. All right, so then we are going to jump over. We are going to jump over to Be Right Back in just a little bit here for the next round. But before we do jump, we just wanted to make sure that we noted, because Frank reminded me, because I forgot, that we have a league challenge here next Thursday. So this is the first chance at Nerd Rage Gaming to get points for the upcoming 2024 season. We're hoping it's going to be a great turnout. We're going to be streaming it, so if you can, come try to get some points. But if you can't, we'd love to have you join us here on stream. So we will catch you guys in just a little bit with our third round. Welcome back to Pokemon Trading Card Game Locals. I'm Dan Hugar here with Pokemon expert Frank Mintmeyer, and we're about to watch another round, this time of Rapid Strike Box, played by Christian Jr., versus Lost Zone Giratina, my boy, played by Ryan Prusak. So, Frank, tell us a little bit about what this matchup looks like.
So this matchup, similar to traditional Turbo or Kyogre Lost Box variants, seems to be just naturally a little favored for Christian. Yogaloop plays, Double Gunner. There's a lot more opportunities for multi-prize turns where Christian can then take an extra turn. However, because of that Giratina V-Star, or Star Requiem, and Lost Impact, Ryan has a lot of different ways to deal with these three prize threats in one turn.
And I think that's the big deal for Christian versus Ryan here. For Rapid Strike Box into Lost Zone in general, as we saw, Lost Zone Box has Dragonite to do big damage, 250. But outside of that, there's really no major attacker that could swing for a one shot. And so, because of that, Christian's able to snipe, 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 take advantage of the low HP guys, and take his time. Against Ryan, though, like you said, Giratina can take a one shot on a VMAX relatively easily.
Yeah, looking at this board, I'm sure Ryan also plays access to Cramorant. So I think big things we'll be looking for from Ryan are early Cramorant damage to weaken some of these three prize Pokemon, put things in range of Lost Impact, make sure your Giratinas get value, and then switch cart to mitigate Double Gunner damage. And then if you're Christian, we're just looking to stack up Double Gunners, uh, probably looking to deal with Manaphy, put pressure on Giratina when possible. The only problem is that Rapid Strike Box typically doesn't play access to boss. So as long as Ryan has access to his Manaphy on the bench and Pokemon to bring up off of an escape rope, Giratina should come in as a fresh threat.
Exactly. And one of the things that Ryan has to counteract some of Christian's plays are those switch cards. So switch card lets you switch your active basic Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon and then heal 30 damage from it. And so Double Gunner, the ability that Frank mentioned there, it says for Inteleon VMAX, discard a water energy from your hand and put 2 damage counters on 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So like we saw in the last game, Rapid Strike Blocks plays Medicham V, which has that Yoga Loop attack, which would allow him to take multiple turns in a row. And because Ryan plays a bunch of low HP basics, it's pretty straightforward for Christian to be able to do that once, twice in a game.
Yeah, looking at Christian's turn, we saw him start. He got the Inteleon V down. He got the attachment. Not really sure what's going on with the rest of the hand, but I would say it's safe to say there will be at least a Gmax Spiral coming out to take a one prize knockout. Uh, Not terrible. Obviously, Christian going first, he couldn't play an Irida. Starting the Lumineon V is kind of unfortunate, but I'd say all in all, a solid first turn. And then jumping over to Ryan's first turn, saw him Nest Ball, take a second to look through the prizes. He was eyeing up all the Pokemon, making sure he has access to everything he needs. I saw the Cramorant, another Comfey, and a Greninja as possible candidates off of that Nest Ball, so it seems apparent that Ryan's already looking for a potential turn 1 Escape Rope and Cramorant attack with 4 in the Lost Zone, so we'll see what order of sequencing he chooses to do with the Lost Zoning.
And I think that's the main thing that Ryan has going for him, though, is kind of a disadvantage too. Lost Zone Giratina doesn't get the turn 1 Mirage Gate or turn 2 Sableye very often without an Abyss Seeking from Giratina. And it's not intended to. You're not trying to turbo through your deck as quickly.
Mm.
You're trying to set up for those big Lost Impacts, Star Requiems with Giratina. So what that means is Ryan's probably not going to be able to double snipe or anything this turn, but what Ryan will be able to do is to likely hit into that Lumineon with Cramorant, or like you said, use an escape rope and hit into the Inteleon V on the bench with Cram, which would then let him take 3 prizes with a Lost Impact and save his Star Requiem for another 3 prize knockout.
Yeah, looking at Ryan's hand, I don't see a Colress yet. I think I see another Comfey in the hand and a couple switching cards. So he's definitely going to be able to see a fair bit of cards this turn and look towards getting to that 4 in the Lost Zone. But as you mentioned, we're not going to see much outside of that 4 in the Lost Zone from Ryan this turn. He doesn't need to get to 7. He- As a matter of fact, his deck actually prefers to conserve resources more for a mid and late game through that Giratina V-Star as opposed to having a stronger early game.
Absolutely. And it looks like he's intentionally trying to avoid using the escape rope in order to keep that Lumineon active. And I can't blame him for that decision, because why give Christian an out to get into his main attacker? But now here's a question. Assuming he doesn't have the Colress, do you go into the Tina and Starabus? And I think that's the answer is yes. And I don't mind this play. Ryan's okay taking a hit into this Giratina if it means he gets closer and closer to getting a Colress and getting into the game.
Yeah, another thing, yeah, like you said, getting closer to a chorus. He also gets closer to a potential turn 2 10 in the Lost Zone. Now, it's not very likely because Giratina V-Star typically doesn't play access to lots of Lost Vacuum, and with only 2 Comfy on the board and no Colress played, it would take a lot for that 10 in the Lost Zone to be achieved. But it puts him very close to 7 in the Lost Zone, which is also very good as it would allow for a turn 2 Lost Impact.
Absolutely. And oh, this is a dream for Ryan for that escape rope to come down, because it means Ryan can absorb a hit with a comfy and force that GMAX spiral to take a single prize, not set up for a larger multi prize turn or the combo package that Christian tries to pull off. Which it may seem counterintuitive of Christian getting to take a prize is a bad thing here, but Christian's not going to win this game by accelerating prize, 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 prize. He's going to win this game by setting up a combination that gives him a checkmate more than anything else.
Right. Just taking a second to look at the board really quick. One thing to note, I'm not sure if Ryan plays more than one copy of Boss and Lost Zone Giratina, or if he's choosing to play a slightly more updated cross switcher variant that recently got some popularity at NAIC, but that Metacham could be in a little bit of danger for these next few turns before it really gets its value. Unfortunately, Christian did have to bench it due to that research. Another thing to note was off of the escape rope, Ryan had to debate for a second. Uh, I saw in his hand he had access to a grass energy, but I also saw in his hand he still doesn't have a Colress. So I
Right.
think his debate was, does he value a Comfey, does he value Greninja, or does he value Manaphy more? And I think choosing to continue to value Manaphy and then also just realizing that you're probably going to have to use concealed cards, Comfey is the right choice. Because now, had he just promoted this Manaphy, this is almost a free Rapid Strike, or Rapid Flow on the following turn from Christian.
Absolutely. And also by Ryan advancing this comfy, he kind of undoes half of one of the double gunners that Christian used early, because now that 2 damage counters just goes away. And Christian decides to pick up the rapid strike energy from the Inteleon. And in general, when you're doing the 140 damage, it's not a bad thing to do, but he already had the knockout without it. So what do you think of that decision there?
I think the big debate is Cheryl. Obviously, we saw him pitch one Cheryl off of the research. I'm not sure if he plays more Cheryl. I always go back to the list because while
Ooh.
lists are important, some people do choose to make modifications to lists that had success at NEIC. But as I heard from your ooh, we did see the Cramorant get pitched off of that first flower selecting
Yes.
in favor of Colress, so it seems almost like you have to. But that's definitely going to be a lot harder for Ryan, as now he has one less way to soften up this Inteleon VMAX.
Absolutely. And so one advantage Ryan does have here is now that he's gotten off the chorus, he is going to be at 7, which means he will be able to Mirage Gate if he desires. But now there's an option. He could go in and hit with the Giratina, but he could also try to go in with the Greninja snipe if possible and snipe the Remoraid on the bench. And that could be a big deal, because one of the issues with this Rapid Strike box is it kind of bricks. It's a little
Right.
bit bricky. And even Cyrus Davis, who she won NAIC with Rapid Strike box, said, you're going to brick sometimes. So you just have to pick and know when it's okay for your deck to kind of fall to pieces.
Right. I think I'm a big fan of this Greninja play. One thing to note on Ryan's hand is I just saw him put some cross switchers to, I guess, the back of his hand. So he
Oh,
does play those. That's very important for this matchup because now Ryan could do this cross switcher play and attack with Greninja. Of course, he needs a water energy still to attach, and depending on what list Ryan's playing, he may only have access. Oh, there are 2 water energy in his deck. So a play he could have done. Oh, 3 water energy. Interesting.
which if he has 2 gates, that's not really a problem. But
Right.
that is not what I was expecting.
I actually don't mind this play because
Oh,
he could be choosing to either target down. He could target down any of the 2 prize Pokemon. I'd say the 2 best 2 prizers to choose are the Metacham or the Urshifu. If you get rid of the Metacham, your Manaphy's safe for a turn. If you get rid of the Urshifu, your bench is safe for a turn. So there's a lot of different things that you could choose. I think ultimately though, it's probably better to target down the Metacham, as the Metacham would be something that gives him an extra turn.
And I was just going to say, actually, exactly the play Ryan is making here. The other thing you can do is gust up the Remoraid, drop the path to the peak, and then shred.
Hmm.
And he may not even drop the path, but shredding the Remoraid doesn't seem like a terrible decision, even if it exposes the Giratina to a hit, because Christian doesn't have anything on his board that can knock out the Giratina.
Right.
And he's still two double gunners and a Yoga Loop away, or at least one double gunner, an Alakazam, and a Yoga Loop away from taking a free turn. But if he does that, the Giratina is untouched.
Right. Yeah, no matter which way you look at it, this Giratina is going to stay alive for a turn. And I think the way you have to look at this matchup is your Giratina needs to at least take two to three prizes for it to have gotten its value. Because you have to accept that one to two prizes are going to go away early game. And then one to two prizes are going to come off a Yoga Loop. So you need both Giratinas to take the rest of the game.
Absolutely. And this is one time where maybe taking up the Rapid Strike energy was not as ideal. But as I say that, Christian actually had an opportunity for. Oh, I'm curious what Christian's move is here then. So he's going to be able to hit into the Giratina with Inteleon. He's clearly going to try to set up the Manaphy for a Yoga Loop play, but I don't know if he's going to be able to pull this off cleanly. What are you thinking looking at Christian's board here? What's his move?
Well, I'm hoping he'll give us a flash of his hand, but it looks like he doesn't have that very many cards. So I think, what is this, a Melanie? Yeah, so I guess these three cards are going to be very important to determine the future of this play. I'm going to assume this water goes on the Urshifu,
Absolutely.
unless, yeah, it probably has to go on the Urshifu, otherwise this play just goes back to Gmax Spiral, I'd guess.
And I think the last card in his hand is a Rapid Strike
Oh, he
energy.
just had one card. Yeah, so I'm not sure how fond I am of the commitment to this play, I guess. Um, I still agree with earlier, like in the previous turn, picking up that Rapid Strike energy. You know that your opponent doesn't really play any hand disruption. Tina does play Iono, but if they're Ionoing, then they're probably not going to be killing your Remoraid unless it was Cross Switch or Iono, which is a lot of resources for one prize.
Right.
So I think Christian felt pretty safe detaching the energy, but I would have liked to see him actually hold the Ultra Ball, Nest Ball stuff because he didn't even discard the water for Melanie. So it would have been nice to just hold those for a turn, I think. Maybe getting a little greedy and hoping to hit the perfect three.
And I think using the Nest Ball to get the Alakazam, I think would have been a bit better because, like you said, you Ultra Balled something away to get a basic. And unless you're grabbing the Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX or something, it's probably a resource you want to keep.
Right.
But now for Ryan's side of the things, Ryan's going to try to take a knockout on this Inteleon VMAX with Star Requiem, and he got the V Star off of the Colress.
Yeah, that's a pretty good Colress.
That is an extremely good Colress because he really does not care about that Comfy and that Heavy Ball from what we see on his board.
The Comfy could be of slight concern. He has one in his hand, so it's not of terrible concern, but later in the game an Iono could hit
True.
Ryan pretty hard. But I think taking a look at his hand, realizing he still has access to two Comfy, makes that a pretty safe pitch.
And if he's able to evolve both Tina and get some energy on the bench Tina, which is a lot to ask, he may be able to just run away with this game because then Christian, even with an Iono, will have too many liabilities on his board to avoid like not losing the game to some kind of gust.
Yeah, this turn, as Ryan, I think the ideally, I think he's at 9 of the Lost Sun at the moment. I was gonna say ideally you would start Requiem this turn, and then Lost Impact, and like set up your board to where you just need cross switchers to Lost Impact, the benched Metacham or Luminion. Um, However, Christian still only have 5 prizes, and his board is not looking very threatening to put you on a one-turn clock. So
Right.
I think you would also be just fine using Lost Impact. You could keep Greninja as a resource. You could set up for a Lost Impact this turn. Then the following turn you could use Greninja to knock out the Inteleon VMAX, set up 90 on the Urshifu, and put everything in range of being knocked out. There's a number of plays that Ryan can go for. So I
Yeah.
guess it's really just a matter of his hand, the resources left in his deck, or his comfortability in the matchup.
And I think that's the question is setting up a combination play like that, it ooh, and that hurts a little bit getting rid of that Mirage Gate because that was exactly the point I was going to make. Setting up like a game plan that requires some of those combinations typically would be fine if you're able to thin your deck down enough. but it makes it a little harder to sustain that if an Iono comes down or
Right.
something similar. So, but if Ryan's able to get an attachment or two onto this second Giratina V Star, he could be, as the kids say, cooking. Please, I apologize for saying that to everyone who's listening. But legitimately, he could be in a very advantageous position here.
Yeah, I'm thinking more about Ryan's plays. That switch card is also very huge,
It
especially
is.
in combination with this Path to the Peak, because now this Giratina V-Star will not get knocked out, which means he's not going to put himself into a vulnerable position for Iono yet.
Right.
And even if he is now, this Giratina is not going to die, so it doesn't matter that nothing else on his board got powered up.
Absolutely. And so, what Christian's going to need to do in order to set up this play is to bounce the path to the peak, set up Giratina V Star so that way what is it? The first attack on Urshifu VMAX, a
Gale
Gale
Thrust.
Thrust. A Gale Thrust can take the knockout while also using Metacham to take an extra turn here. And right now, Christian has the Metacham play to knock out the Manaphy, but it doesn't look like he has much else because I didn't see a Stadium Bounce or anything in hand outside of the Rapid Strike energy.
Right, and also with no access to Inteleon V, I don't think this Giratina is going to get
Yeah.
knocked out anytime soon.
But off the prizes and the top deck, I guess, we do see the Stadium Bounce. So this could be big based on what else Christian has in his hand, but I don't know what else he has in his hand.
Yeah. Hmm.
So we do see the two stadiums. I see at least one water energy, a Rapid Strike Urshifu V, an energy retrieval, excuse me. I think that's it. And an Inteleon VMAX, which is less than helpful here.
Right. Again, one thing to make note of is earlier in the game when Christian Ultra Balled away a Nest Ball, another card, when he wasn't really getting much value out of it, could have preserved that Nest Ball and Ultra Ball and would have had access to potentially an Inteleon VMAX this turn.
Yeah,
He could have also found this Radiant Alakazam at another point. He could have even knocked out this Giratina V-Star this turn.
absolutely.
Obviously, that's a lot of planning into the future, dependent on draws, the top deck, the prizes, etc. But
Yep.
this Giratina V-Star is going to live with 2 prizes on the bench. That's going to be all there is for him.
Yep, because Ryan's gonna be able to use that escape rope, force up a V, and then attach energy to retreat. And that, to your point, we talked a little bit about sequencing in the last game, and sequencing is a huge deal in scenarios like this because a somewhat innocuous decision could end up hurting you so much long term,
Right.
especially with either of these two decks that have so many moving pieces and rely on putting together combinations that are incredibly powerful but have to be managed well.
Right. I think, and I'm only commenting on that sequencing play from Christian because he nothing became of that Radiant Alakazam, unfortunately. So I think if there's like one thing to look back on, it's sometimes people like to play cards to play them when instead they should be held. Looking at a comment from the chat saying he could have KO'd the Giratina with Metacham. I don't think he could have because the Metacham only does 100 damage.
Yes.
And the Giratina had 110 damage on it. So that would have still been 70 short, depending on other damage could have been less. But yeah, going back to that game, sequencing, that's just one tiny play from Christian's side. It still would have depended on draws after the fact of that
Absolutely.
play. So in hindsight, that looks like the right play. In the moment, it may not have been the right play. And then talking about sequencing from Ryan's side, I would say Ryan sequenced very well. He had access to all the cards he needed to win the game. That Giratina, the use of the switch card to allow the Giratina to live another hit from any attacker, gave Ryan the perfect amount of resources. One could even say a surplus of resources to take down those final 2 prizes.
Absolutely. And being able to avoid the hand disruption was a big thing too, since he could build whatever he needed to. And so we're going to jump over quickly to our other game that's currently ongoing. Correct, Bryce? Hey, we are. Excellent. So over here, we also have Lost Zone Giratina, which served me mostly well at NAIC. And this is going against Lost Zone Kyogre, with Michael showing off the World's 2022 deck box in the camera view. Not supposed to have that there, Michael. You're on the team. You should know this. And so it looks like Michael's coming in to do a Greninja snipe on 2 of the Giratina V-Star Ali has put on the board. But I have a question. How did he do that with a Manaphy on the board? Is that a Manaphy or am I just
No,
missing things?
he only did 90 to the active.
Ah, okay.
So Michael and I play a lot of the Lost Zone box matchup, and a thing he is a big fan of is bench locking. And so
Ah,
Ali has bench locked himself where there is no Sableye in play. and therefore no multi-prize turn.
Right.
So what Michael is looking to do is now basically take 6 prizes with 1 Sableye.
And that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's a big play in the Mirror and Lost Box in general, since you can put yourself in such a rough spot. And also, in general, with Lost Box, you can do that by echoing Horn
Mm-hmm.
and shoving something your opponent doesn't want down on the board. And for Ale, he's going to have to expend a ton of resources to try to dig himself into a position where he can make something happen here. And it looks like he has 4 prizes remaining, so he's got some work to do.
Right. I don't know. Since we're jumping in the middle of the game, we don't know what resources Ali has, namely Switch Cart.
Yes.
Just looking at Michael's plan for this matchup, the one way Ali could disrupt Michael's plan as well as progressing his board state and taking prizes would be through the use of Switch Cart to fiddle with the numbers on Comfees. Those Giratinas are not going anywhere.
Right.
The damage on them is just going to stick there. There's 190 on the one without energies and 260 on the one with energies. So both can die to 1 Lost Mine. So again, Michael's probably not going to want to remove those from the board until he knows he's not in danger of losing to a Sableye the following turn.
Agreed. And it looks like Ale uses Lost Impact to knock out a Comfy, which, man, that has got to feel bad,
Yeah,
using that many resources.
That does not feel great, but again, with the bench lock and the way Michael's playing, he really only has access to this one Giratina V-Star for probably the rest of the game.
And I think what Michael can do here then is, like you said, even without taking a 6 prize turn, he can knock out the 2 Giratina V-Star and remove all of the threats from Ale's board, or set it up so that way he's going to win with a single Sableye next turn.
Yeah, I think what he's going to be looking to do is he probably wants to put damage on Manaphy, something that won't have any reason to really come in the active.
Right.
Greninja has a lot of HP, so I'd say that this turn is going to be a turn where he just... Well, actually, I think he's not going to choose to open up any bench space until he wins the game, because there is the possibility that Ali plays Radiant Halucha and Sableye, so unless Michael only removes 1 board space, aka he could take a knockout this turn and then take the remaining 4 in the following turn, because he wants to play around Radiant Halucha to put 2 damage on 2 Comfeys, or Comfey Manaphy, and then Sableye to take the 2 prizes.
I agree, and it looks like that may be the move. And I'm curious to see where he's placing all the damage, and if he is going to take a knockout. And it looks like he is not taking the knockout. He is kind of like you said. Oh, he's taking a knockout on the benched one? I'm very confused what's happening here.
No, I think there's just confusion about the damage. Yeah,
okay, so he is putting the active to 270. So one thing that Ale does have here is he can knock out that Dragonite with Star Requiem, assuming he has a Gust remaining, and say, Michael, now you have to take 6 prizes this turn, or else I just win the game.
Yeah. Looking at Michael's board and the damage on Ali's board, I don't know if he could even do that.
And that's where Ale may still have an advantage here, is the fact that Michael had to bench that Dragonite means Ale needs 1 less turn to win. Can you check on that? We're going to have one of our lovely team member here, Eli, check and make sure that all the damage counters were placed and organized appropriately, so that way we don't see any shenanigans during these games. Because again, surprisingly enough, if you have streamers and people watching the games, you should use that resource to make sure the right choices are made.
Right. Anybody that's a follower of the official Play Pokemon stream will have seen time and time again matches get interrupted in the middle because someone has caught something. I know that my friends and I have caught an incident or two when one of our friends are playing. So obviously it's good to help your friends, but it's good to help everyone playing, and that's why we're trying to catch what's going on right now.
Absolutely. And that's part of the integrity of the game, of just making sure that, not that our friend has the right thing happen to them, but that the right decisions and the right things come out of the board state. So let me see. Looks like Michael is explaining the amount of damage placed, and looks like we're probably okay here.
Because if I'm remembering correctly, and I probably am not, but if I was remembering correctly, I believe there was originally 260 on the active, then there was 190 on the bench, and now the active has
270, it looks like.
270 and 240.
The active had the wrong amount of damage.
Okay, so there was an incorrect amount of damage previously, and it looks like everything has been accounted for. So we are good here, which is good.
Right.
Yes, and Michael is explaining to Eli exactly what happened. So Eli, thank you for the assist. Much appreciated. So Frank, what what's the play here? What do you think Ollie's going to try to do?
Well, I think this changes a lot because I originally thought Michael was in a way better position, being up a considerably higher amount of damage on the board. If Ali were to just have boss in his hand, I'm not really sure what much Michael could do. However,
Ollie played the Colress this turn.
yeah, so that's not happening. But
There is a chance though that Ollie still has the cross switchers available,
right,
which that would be game changing. Unfortunately, if Ollie doesn't and he just has to take a single prize knockout here, that probably will be the game for Michael, since Ollie really won't have a way to accelerate more damage into play if Michael decides to knock out these Giratina. And if I'm Michael and Ollie does take a single prize here, I feel like you want to knock out both Tina, even if it's not the six prize turn.
right, yeah, I think if I'm Michael, I'm definitely knocking out these two Giratina. Like I said, the only danger you put yourself in is it a Radiant Halucha and a Sableye, but at this point in the game, it's either put yourself in danger of boss or put yourself in danger of a more elaborate combination.
Absolutely. And one of the issues for Lost Tina is you don't have quite as much space to put something in there
Right.
like a Turbo Lost box may. So it looks like Ollie takes the one prize, lost zoning both of his remaining grass energy on the Tina, and we'll see what he tries to do here. And so from Michael's end, I am curious to see what play he goes with, especially now that he's completely emptied his deck outside of the energy he's about to put back in.
Right. Michael's probably going to take knockouts on the Giratinas and a Comfey, and then set up his board to have two Sableyes on the board so he can't lose or be in danger of losing to a Roxanne from Ali.
Absolutely.
If I'm Michael, and based on what I know of Michael's deck and what I know of Ali's deck, that's all I'm looking to do is make myself Roxanne proof and essentially set up board and force my opponent to have a way to knock out my Dragonite.
Absolutely. And here, kind of on that note, I would almost like to see him use one of his remaining Mirage Gates just to get two Psychic Energy down, one on each Sableye, to just remove that loss condition. But granted, with only two cards left in deck, any Iono, something like that's going to get him the Psychic Energy. And it's just up to Michael whether or not he wants to attach it now or assume he'll draw into it. And it looks like that's kind of the decision he's processing, since he has the Mirage Gate in hand, I believe.
Yeah, I see another Psychic in his hand, so unless I believe he just put one back though, right?
He did. There are two cards in his deck are Water Energy and a Psychic Energy.
Gotcha.
And so Michael's really just taking his time because, like you said, this is a win or lose the game decision right here.
One thing that is important for us to talk about because we joined in the middle of the game is that Ali could be down Roxanne's already, could be down Iono's already. They could be lost owned or discarded at earlier points in the game, and that could be why Michael is so heavily debating whether or not
Yes,
it's worth it to preemptively do all this because he could be more concerned with an alternative play that we're not even thinking of. Can't exactly name an alternative play at the moment, but
right.
potentially there could be something to do with this Dragonite getting stuck active. It could have to deal with maybe somehow I don't know. Sableye can't attack. There's so many niche things that I just might my mind might be missing.
Absolutely. And Michael is taking his very calm, patient time here, making a decision. And I'm not going to tell him to move it along because that would not be the professional thing to do. So we'll give him time to process. And if you are Michael, what is the decision you make? Do you knock out the Tinas? Do you accept the risk? Or do you try to set up for that six prize turn?
Well, at this point, I think Michael's since he's been checking all his resources, checking his resources. I think he's just trying to see if it's even possible for a Giratina V-Star to attack and knock out Dragonite if he were to potentially just knock out this active. Like, are there even three energies, specifically a grass and a psychic energy left, and a boss or gust card of some sort? Are those cards even left for Ollie to knock out the Dragonite?
And so I'd agree with you, but Michael actually hasn't checked any of Ollie's resources. He's only been checking his own, which is interesting. It seems like he's mapping out his own play more than anything else.
I thought I saw him take a look at Ollie's lost zone,
Oh,
but
did he as
maybe
well?
that was Ollie looking at his own lost zone. I don't remember, but we've seen Ollie twice now.
And he does decide to take the
Yeah.
five prizes and take the knockouts. And honestly, I think that's the right choice.
Right. I mean, you have both your Sableyes down. You know you have a Psychic Energy in the top two cards of the deck. You're Iona proof. The only thing that could happen is you brick off of a Roxanne.
Absolutely.
And if you're breaking off of a Roxanne, that also requires your opponent to have a way to attack.
Yes. And I'm not sure if Ollie still has his Cramorant remaining since we joined the game a little late. But if he does, that's really his only out, is
Mhm.
to knock out the Sableye with Cramorant or Greninja, I guess, but likely Cramorant, and then try to Roxanne in the same turn.
Yeah, it's gonna be
Or
an
he
uphill
could
battle.
Sableye the Sableye, set up something else, and then couple it with a Roxanne.
Yes,
Is that a Manaphy he's putting back in the deck?
Yeah, I'm not. I don't think we've even seen a Sableye so far from Ollie because of the bench lock. So he probably is just sitting on one.
That's fair. That's very fair. So we'll see the Manaphy come out, which, I mean, I don't mind because it removes ninjas of play. But if Michael has access to a Psychic Energy, it doesn't matter if he has a Water and a Psychic.
Yeah. All right. So there's the Sableye.
Yep. And we probably are going to see, if I'm guessing, Ollie's going to need to go in with the Psychic Energy on the Sableye, knock out the Sableye, set something else up, and then Roxanne. And if we're not able to pull that off, things could get real tough for Ollie here and just be game over. So if you're Ollie, then I know that we're kind of mapping that out as a play. What are the plays do you think he has available?
Well, it's tough. If he had the obviously the way he's playing, I would say it's safe to say he doesn't have access to Radiant or to Halucha, not Radiant Halucha, to do the 10 pings and just take the game.
Correct.
So I think the one thing you have to do as Ollie is you have to take a knockout and you have to disrupt your opponent.
Yes.
You have to say better have it. If you don't, if you just say, if you look at Michael's hand is ginormous.
Yes.
It can barely fit in his hands. So you know he's got to have the attack with Sableye at his disposal, which means you know you have to disrupt.
Absolutely. And so I'm curious if Ollie has disruption available. And the tough part is, if Ollie Ionos him, he still loses the game because he
Right.
has a Psychic Energy in deck and a 2-card deck. And so we are going to see the Mirage Gate come out from Ollie just to clear that Comfy or get that Comfy out of the active slot. I believe to get the Comfy out of the active spot. Maybe not.
There's got to be a switching card in there. He's got a pretty big hand himself.
I assume so. Michael also is curious what's happening here, so glad we're on the same page. And I guess he's just Mirage Gating these energy out to thin the deck, but if you're doing so, why did you Super Rod more into the deck? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, maybe he's just trying to get value out of his Super Rod. I don't know. I feel like with the way your board's set up, you have what you need to win the game. You just gotta hope your opponent doesn't have what they need. But that
And
I don't know basically seals the game.
it does. It does. And that's going to be the tricky part is that now Michael's going to have the Psychic Energy out of either that card or the next one. So unfortunately for Ale, Michael's definitely going to take this one. Michael probably thinks it's pretty fortunate, but he did do an excellent job setting up that turn where Ollie wasn't able to do anything. He wasn't able to respond or reply.
Yeah, Ollie. I mean, he may not have even had access to Roxanne. Like we've been theorizing this entire game around the fact that he has access to a Roxanne to win the game.
Absolutely.
But Ollie could have just elected to only play Ionos. So again, we don't know. Also, Roxanne could have been the lost zone, but Michael's talking about it right now, so maybe that's the play they're talking about. It's just really hard to tell, especially jumping in the middle of a game.
It is. And credit to Michael, though, for setting up his board so that way Iono was not a lost condition for him.
Right.
Even though Roxanne, he would have less control over.
Right. That's one of those things. It's not necessarily on the path of sequencing. It's more so thinking turns ahead, but it's just one of those plays that Lost Box players find themselves having to do a lot more often than other decks, is thinking turns ahead, making themselves less Iono-proof, especially since Iono has been the big problem card of the format for Lost Box.
Absolutely.
Time to pick pairings.
And then
We'll be right back.
yeah, we are going to be right back in just a second. But before we go, just want to make a quick note again. We have locals for Pokemon Trading Card Game every Thursday, and we are always happy to have you guys come out and watch the stream if you can't be here in person. And otherwise, come play, try to win some store credit, and play against some really good players like Michael Davidson, who is going to the World Championships this year. So we'll be back in just a minute for our final round of the day. Welcome back, everyone, to our last round of locals today. We bring you, well, some interesting stuff for this last one. We have Arc Pile, played by Connor Chiapetta on the left. And by Pile, I mean there are 4 different Stage 1 lines. And for Tim, we have Regidrago V-Star with Forretress EX. So, Frank, tell us a little bit about that deck. What is Tim trying to do with these shenanigans here?
Well, if you don't know, because I didn't until 20 seconds ago, Fortress EX lets you knock it out, and then you can search your deck for, I believe it's 5 grass energies and attach them to your Pokemon any way you like. So pretty good in combination with Regidrago. V-Star, as we know, it attacks for 2 grass energy to fire, so you can essentially power it up all the way at the expense of 2 prizes. You could even power up 2 at the expense of 2 prizes. And so the way I'd like to at least look at this deck in theory is it functions similarly to the way Arceus is used in Arceus Drago, which is Arceus accelerates the board and then just gets knocked out. And you still are meant to win the game with Regidragos. So I'd say the way this works is just Regidragos have to do a little bit more of the heavy lifting in terms of dealing damage and taking prizes, but Arceus and Fortress function the same way in setting up the board.
And I think thank you for explaining, and thank you for telling everyone how much homework we do in advance of these tournaments. So, always good for them to know. Anyway, I think the advantage that Tim has here with the Regidrago is that Arceus gets knocked out over the course of a couple attacks, so it gives your opponent an opportunity to set up their board, do what they need to do, so you are both enacting your game plans kind of on schedule.
Right.
What Tim's trying to do is force feed Connor 2 to 4 prizes, and which Connor would they send, oh, cool, I got extra prizes. And then Tim says, I'm very happy for you, Iono or
Right.
Roxanne, because then Tim's able to disrupt Connor, putting him in a position where even if he's ahead on prizes, his board isn't set up enough to withstand multiple Regidrago V-Star that are using either Duraludon V-Max's attack to do 220 and shred, Giratina V-Star to do 280 and take big knockouts, and basically accelerate to the game to the point where Connor can't respond.
Right. Yeah. It's going to be tough. Look, I looked at Connor's deck a little bit before the start of the tournament, just talking about Arceus. He loves Arceus. I love Arceus. Talk about it. Connor does have access to Aerodactyl V-Star, and Aerodactyl V-Star is really good against Goodra decks because it's one of the few Stage 1s that Arceus decks play that is capable of still two-shotting through that Rolling Iron attack.
Absolutely.
Doing 240 and then 160 after the 80 damage reduction, so it is a very big threat. If Aerodactyl were to get the first attack off into a Regidrago V-Star, or were to take a knockout onto a Regidrago V-Star, Connor can trade favorably with an Aerodactyl.
Absolutely. The tricky part there is Aerodactyl can attack with 2 attachments, or it can attack with an acceleration from Arceus V or V-Star, but you're still asking to set up the stage 1, get the double attachments, and when you're attacking with that, you're not setting up anything else. So you are able to 2-shot the Regidrago V-Star, but not while establishing your board any further. And that can be the tricky part for Connor. And
Right.
honestly, for Tim, getting a Battle VIP pass right off the bat, that's a pretty good start.
Yeah, that's pretty good for Tim. Starting the Squawk ability is unfortunate. I did see access to a Collapsed Stadium in his hand, so later in the game he could remove that threat if it's not dealt with. Battle VIP Pass is very interesting. It's not a card I was expecting to play. However, when you're not playing Arceus and you're playing something that's a little bit less simplistic on turn 1, it is nice to have that consistency.
And I would agree with that. This is intended to be a turbo deck, even if you aren't playing all quite the same turbo cards as Lost Box or something like that. You're still trying to burn your deck to the ground to get set up way before your opponent has a chance to.
Right.
And so we see the Ultra Ball here. What do you think Tim's going for?
Well, he already has some pretty good cards. I don't know what the rest of his hand is. If he has a draw supporter like a Research, getting Noivern out here is pretty nice. I probably would have preferred to get Goodra. Oh, interesting. I was
And
going to Ultra Ball away that Fortress and the Noivern. He has a Trekking Shoe in his hand, so I think maybe prior to these Ultra Balling, I would have preferred to see... Oh, wait, can Squawk and Seize be used as the active?
It can be used on your first turn regardless
Oh
of
my
where it is
god,
on your
that's
board.
insane. Okay, I was sitting here thinking you can't even Squawk ability, but okay.
No. And I think he's setting up to try to get as many of the key things he wants out of his deck before he
Right.
Squawk abilities.
All right, then this changes everything. I thought that Tim was playing himself into a dead hand. I still think I would have liked to see the Trekking Shoes be played first before any deck searches, or any Ultra Ball thinning, rather, because you could have drawn the Goodra, you could have drawn the Noivern, you could have drawn any Pokemon you want to discard. There are a lot of good things you could have gotten off that Trekking Shoes, and I'm assuming he's still going to play it here regardless, so it's not like you would have been in any danger.
And I agree with that statement, and
Because now that's another Fortress.
it is.
That's a pretty good fire energy, though.
That is an extremely good fire energy. And I believe you are still able to use Squawk and Squeeze even if you have no hand, because it does not say if you discard any cards in this way.
If
So
it's
you are still able to draw 6 cards. It's similar to playing Professor Research.
right. Yeah, it has the same. I think it has the same text.
It
But-
should.
Time to research.
We'll take a
You look up
quick
Squawk
look at that.
ability. I'll look up research.
Excellent. All right. It looks like the general consensus is they are fine with it. We'll still do a little like Googling here.
Because research has and draw. So if it said then, that might be a little bit of a debate.
No, and it looks like they're making a decision here, and we'll talk it out and make sure to get them feedback. It does say you can discard your hand and draw 6 cards.
If it says and, then yeah, same text.
Yes.
My concern was if it said then, because then is a word usually used for conditional things.
Exactly. It's
So
the
that was,
if.
Yeah.
If is the problematic word at times.
True.
And funny enough, just on a side tangent, that's why a lot of the language in cards in the Sword and Shield block on have changed
Mhm.
because of cards like Zoroark GX.
Right.
That said, discard a card from your hand. Now, it says draw 2 cards. You must discard a card to use this ability.
Mhm.
So you can't just discard for free. You just can't burn things. You have to be able to effectively use the ability. And speaking of using abilities, it looks like Tim got rid of Luminion here to put down a Spiritomb, and I don't know if I love that.
Well, looking at the rest of his hand, which we didn't really see, he could just be sitting on a supporter in a fortress and be like, all right, I have everything I need to execute my game plan. He could have his Regidrago V-Star, his fortress, and a way to get this out the active. And he could just be golden and then not need Luminion. I do like Spiritomb a little bit in this matchup. I think it'll have nice disruption against Connor earlier in the game, and then also just obviously removing access to Luminion is a nice thing, but I don't know if I prefer it at the expense of consistency. So I guess it really just depends on what Tim's got going on in his hand.
And that was my concern, is not even so much for right now, because he does have Iono in hand, it looks like, so he'll be able to play. But to not have it available later if Connor does play Iono or something here, because then he's removing an out from the deck to be able to play the game. And early in the game, I'm always a little wary of that, because you're gonna want to be able to enact your game plan as soon as possible. Well, looks
Right.
like Connor could possibly have the perfect Arceus turn 1 and get an Arceus V down and attach an energy to it.
Not much more you can ask. Maybe you can be a little greedy with the Arceus gods and ask for a double turbo energy and a Trinity charge.
It's a lot. That's a lot.
That's a lot to ask for. I mean, he did get 3 mulligan cards, so
He did.
I wouldn't say it's unlikely to happen. I'd say it's unlikely to happen, but not crazy. But looking at his hand, I actually don't even see one. I don't see a switch card. 2, I don't see a DT. And 3, I don't even see another Pokemon to use with Trinity Charge other than using those Ultra Balls. So
It
I
does
wouldn't
look
feel
like
too
he has
bad.
3 Ultra Balls in
Yeah.
hand, though, so he's going to be able to get out whatever we want.
Right. I wouldn't mind seeing an Ultra Ball come down this turn actually, and getting out like one of those basic Vs, namely the Aerodactyl V. I think that might be his best secondary attacker in this matchup.
Well, to be honest, I wouldn't even mind seeing another Arceus V, because there's a non-zero chance. We know, looking at Tim's hand, it's probably not happening, but Connor's got to know there's a chance that Arceus just gets knocked out.
That is true.
And now the other fun thing, though, is Connor attached a basic energy this turn. And do you know what Noivern EX's second attack does?
You can't attach a special energy.
Correct. So there's an opportunity on Tim's end to prevent Connor from being able to attach a double turbo. And granted, if he takes a knockout, it looks like Connor does have Raihan in hand. But if he takes a knockout on Ionos with Noivern, it may be a little scary for Connor.
How much damage does the Noivern attack do that says no special energy?
140 damage.
All right, so that does knock out an Alakazam. I was
It
gonna say
does.
if it only did 120, wouldn't be too big of a deal.
Right, but it does 2-shot V-Stars.
That's very important.
It is. I actually played against Noivern EX, like, committed deck at NAIC,
Really?
playing Lost Zone Giratina. And
Mhm.
I did win the set. I did win the set. But man, getting 2-shot while not being able to attach jet energy or do almost anything else I wanted to was a scary, scary thing. All right, and we are going to see a Halucha come down and put 10 damage on a Regidrago and a Forretress. And a Pineco. I don't really know if I understand the Pineco decision there.
Maybe there's some hidden text we're not worried about. The damage on the Spiritomb, it's It's negligible. The 10 damage on the Regidrago is also kind of negligible. I think this just makes him escape rope proof. That's the main reason to put down the Hawlucha. Because again, Tim's playing a little bit of a off the wall deck, so you don't really know what cards he could be playing. So just one thing with Arceus is it's best to play safe and make sure you can get your game plan off.
Yes, absolutely. And so putting the Hawlucha down, I agree with what you're saying there. My thought more was, ooh, and this is a tough choice. Oh, well, that's a perfect one to hit off the shoe.
Ooh.
That's not.
That's an Ultra Ball.
That
so
is.
This trekking shoe should be. Nope.
Well, and so here's where I'm curious. I almost would have wanted to see the Ultra Ball there for Forretress before the trekking shoe, because the thing you need is a path bounce. And so trying to thin the deck a little bit before you get to that point seems maybe not essential, but very important.
Well, you need a lot. You need a Path Bounce, you need a Fortress, and you need the Regidrago V-Star.
Yes.
So I guess, I don't know. You can't get all 3 cards off of a Trekking Shoes and an Ultra Ball, unfortunately. So I guess I still think I would have agreed with seeing the Ultra Ball for the Fortress, because then you could, one, at least get that Pineco out of harm's way. You don't care if damage goes on the Pineco or the Fortress, because it's just going to get knocked out and the damage will go away.
Absolutely.
Unless there's hidden text that I still don't know about. But
And it looks like we've Ultra Balled for 2 Pokemon, which I'm a little confused
there
on.
was a Nest Ball in his hand.
Okay, and I'm wondering if that Nest Ball just got played.
Yeah, the Nest Ball, I believe, went for the Regidrago V. The Ultra Ball went for the Regidrago V-Star. But this Pineco is still in harm's way.
It is.
However, we do know Tim has 2 Grass Energy in his hand, and there's already 2 Energy on the Regidrago. So maybe it's a little bit of a bait, saying, I want you to attack. But obviously, Connor either not falling for the bait or not having access to boss, just going for this Colress and choosing to set up his board.
And it looks like Connor gets a basic and 2 basic Pokemon 2 energy, which is good, but I don't see a switching out in hand, even though I did see the double turbo. So he would have an opportunity to hit or to accelerate here, but I'm curious if he has the switch out. Because that's a downside of playing down the path to the peak. Connor isn't able to really make the moves he wants to either with that Starbirth.
Yep. I think Connor was anticipating that Tim would have a bump, or maybe Connor looked at his hand and said, I really don't have much going on, so I have to put down this path to slow you down, even if it's at my own expense.
Yeah. And so it looks like we see the V-Guard energy, the basic, and then is that an Arceus V-Star as well? Ah, we do have the switch. All right.
And that's a V-Star. Oh, he's got a very good turn now.
That is an extremely good turn for Connor. And he has the double turbo as well. Wow, what a swing. And Tim is still kind of stuck.
Yeah, Tim's got, I think, a pair of Grass Energy in his hand.
He
So
does.
he's going to have to hope that this Regidrago can carry him places.
And on the bright side, Tim will be able to use... Oh, that's a good top deck.
It's a very good top deck.
So Tim will be able to use Gudra or Giratina V-Star, Duraludon VMAX, whatever he desires here. And I gotta imagine it's going to be Gudra.
Yeah, I think Gudra is probably your best bet. Gudra means that an Arceus hit in combination with an Aerodactyl V-Star hit still doesn't get the knockout.
Absolutely.
Unless Tim doesn't use Fortress EX this turn, in which case, if Connor finds a path bump, he could move the 10 from the Pineco onto the Regidrago. Assuming that the Arceus does 100 damage this turn, he could then do 160 after the damage reduction and take a knockout. That's heavily reliant on Tim's next, technically 2 turns, though.
Absolutely. And it looks like Tim did not find either a Fortress or a Path Bounce, but he does have the Gust in hand at a minimum. So like you said, we'll likely see the Gudra V-Star hit here to prevent a return knockout, because right now taking the knockout with Giratina V-Star seems aggressive. And we are going to see the Gudra hit for 200 and then reducing 80 coming back into his turn.
Yeah, Gudra's your best bet. You could have gotten aggressive with the Giratina V-Star, which is, I think, what Tim was debating. But if you go aggressive with the Giratina V-Star, you have nothing after that. Not even an attack.
Exactly.
Especially looking at Tim's hand, we know there's no Path Bounce, there's no Fortress. He'd basically just be giving Connor another 2 free prizes.
And if I had any feedback for Connor's play so far this game, it would be to show us your hand because we can't see what you have.
Yeah.
But looks like we do bench an Arceus V, which is interesting. So I wonder what else he's trying to play out. Like, do we see a research here?
Yeah.
Do we see nothing here?
Yeah, in these RCS pile decks, typically you like to bench things the turn you're going to power them up, unless it's something you need to not get knocked out the turn it comes into play, like the Aerodactyl V.
Right.
So benching this Arceus makes me believe he's choosing to power it up this turn, as we saw it with that double turbo. But if he's just gonna swing into this Regidrago, doesn't look like he's got much else going on based on how he's thinking.
We do see a box of disaster, which certainly not intended for this matchup, but that is an interesting inclusion for Gardevoir. And so box of disaster, for those who don't know, and Frank, correct me on this, basically says if the Pokemon this card is attached to has full HP and is knocked out by an attack from your opponent's Pokemon from your opponent's Pokemon, put 8 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. Which for Gardevoir EX, in order for them to take big knockouts, they load a ton of damage on their Pokemon, and so you basically change the price swing to something more in your favor.
Yeah, it's very good into Gardevoir, and basically Gardevoir
Yes.
could be good in the Lost Box somehow, some way, if they attack with a Sableye, but I'm pretty sure the way Sableye reads, that doesn't even work that way. And Sableye would not even work because it's not full HP, so...
Well, real quick, because that was an extremely fast turn by Tim. It looks like Tim decided to boss up the Umbreon V and use Goodra V-Star's attack to do 200 damage and take the knockout. And so Tim now has, I believe, 160 damage remaining, or excuse me, 160 health remaining on the Regidrago V-Star. Regidrago V-Star does have 270 health, right?
I gotta check again.
All right, my guy. Thank you, Frank.
I keep thinking it's 280, but if it's 270, then Connor's one Ultra Ball away from knocking it out.
It may be 280, and I just have a poor memory. But Connor is going in with the Aerodactyl V, and this is hilarious because
yeah,
I
it's
think
280. It's 280.
280. Okay, so what Connor may be doing here is not trying to take a knockout. He's going to try to rock crush off the fire energy and say you need to have a fire energy raw in hand in order to attack this turn. And number one, I love this play because speaking of playing to your outs, hitting in with Arceus doesn't do any good. It lets Tim just take 2 more prizes. But here you may be able to buy a little time back with this attack.
Yep. Unfortunately, Tim has a fire energy in his hand.
Correct.
So that's not going to do much of anything.
Yes.
However, then Tim has a tough choice to make because Tim could,
Oh, wait, we do see an Ultra Ball.
for an Aerodactyl V-Star, I like this a lot. But unfortunately, still can't knock it out unless he has a Path Bump.
Correct, because then it would put him to 270 HP, which is just about there.
I still like evolving this though. I like Rock Crush as an out, but putting your opponent to where they only need to take 1 more knockout and there's a damaged Arceus in play is a little bit concerning.
I would agree completely.
I think, and doing 160 and putting this at 10 damage left is still the good play because at any point in the game when Connor finds a Path Bump, this Regidrago would get knocked out.
Absolutely. And so what Tim's going to have to hope to do is, well, honestly, he has a research in hand. So I think his play is research. Let's see what happens. And we're going to see what Connor lost zones here off of the attack.
Oh, he's actually going to go for the Rock Crush like you were talking about. Get rid of that fire.
No, because he did evolve it.
Oh, whoa. Sorry, my bad.
Yes. So
Alright,
he did evolve it. So we
Gonna
are
lost on the top 3 unless he's just
I
forgetting to.
believe so.
Did he lost on it yet?
He did not yet.
Should I go tell him?
Bryce, would you mind checking with him?
Tell him to
Bryce-
lost dive.
Is obviously covering us and making sure we don't make terrible decisions. So he is in the process of telling Connor to lost zone the top 3 cards of his deck.
Come on,
All right,
Connor,
there we
I thought
go.
you were an Arceus
Oh,
guy.
those are big, big drops. More so the Lost City and Boss than the DTE. But now Tim has an option here. Tim can just... Okay, well, listen, Tim.
Yeah, did we not oh, never mind, yeah.
And we are going to take the knockout. Unfortunately, do you have any idea why we didn't see the research from Tim?
Maybe he's trying to bait a dead hand. That's really crazy, though, if he's doing that.
That is. Well, I guess Regidrago V has an opportunity to take a knockout and gust on the Arceus V-Star on the bench.
Connor top deck Diodo, which is pretty wild.
That is very wild. And the Lost City. Oh, no. We could see a huge swing.
Bang.
And
the play I've
then
been talking about the entire game happened.
Tim is going to have to advance the Spiritomb here.
Yeah, nothing else on your board can go up because then you put yourself on a 1-turn clock to win the game.
And that is not a great 2 cards for Tim. So he is a Defiance Belt, I believe, and a Super Rod in hand. So he is going to need an incredibly good top deck to stay in this game.
Yeah, he just needs research and then a Regidrago V-Star and energy.
Absolutely.
Which I say just, but there are 2 research on the bottom of the deck.
Correct.
And another one's already been played. So it's looking a little grim.
It is. The other option he has, though, is an Iono here. But unfortunately, he can't even pop Forretress at any point anymore.
Right.
And so it looks like Connor's going to get another Umbreon V if he has one in deck, which he does not, because one has been lost owned and one has been knocked out.
I mean, at this point, you're just looking to thin. Obviously, Umbreon V would have been nice for Dark Signal, and being down 2 boss is also unfortunate
Yes.
because he had lost on 1 off the first chorus and then lost on 1 off Lost Dive. So there is a sliver of a chance that Connor is unable to close. Not a sliver, a pretty high chance that Connor is unable to close this game out on the following turn, especially considering how he's thinning. Looking at his hand, there was, I believe, a Raihan, an Iono, and then some Pokemon.
Well, actually, that's a good question. Is with the 2/2 Umbreon V line in the deck, how many Boss's Orders do you play with that?
I believe decks play 2 to 3 if they still play Umbreon. And Arctur Umbreon might play more.
And so that's the tricky part then, is because if Connor did play only 2 Boss and the 2/2 Umbreon line, Connor's out of Gust.
Right.
And currently, there's nothing on his board.
Oh my
and he
gosh.
top decks the research.
Oh my gosh.
Unbelievable.
is
What a
crazy.
top deck.
That is crazy. Tim has the chance to just close the game. Tim, just put back a Grass Energy in the Regidrago.
Yes, that's all. No,
That's
not
all you
fire.
Need. You don't need
need
a
fire,
energy.
Tim.
You just
You
need a
don't-
Grass Energy if there's one in the deck. Nope, just the Regidrago. Nice.
All right,
nice,
that's
very
fine.
Nice, very
That's
nice.
fine too. There's plenty of grass in the deck.
Yep. We know he had one in his, at least 1 or 2 in his hand before the Iono, so those are back. This research just needs to be Grass Energy and Regidrago V-Star.
Absolutely. And you know what? Throw the Defiance Belt on the Regidrago too. Let's just crank that up
No,
a little bit.
Throw it on the Pineco.
Yeah, throw it on the Pineco. Let's see it.
Throw
And
it on
Tim,
the Pineco.
for the love
No.
of all that is holy, please do not use Fortress's ability. That's all I
Oh my gosh,
ask.
That'd be a terrible way to end this game. Please do not.
I see a
Regidrago
V-Star.
And no Grass Energy.
No grass. Oh, we haven't used a V-Star yet.
Apex Dragon. Wait, but that can't even. There's a Grass Energy.
There is. He still has to discard the top 7, but I don't think he cares what it is.
I don't think that matters.
Yeah. But let's see what the top 7 are anyway.
Yeah, Connor's
There's a
ready to
boss.
extend the fist bump.
There it
my
is.
Gosh, that was a crazy top deck.
What a top deck to end the game.
Oh my gosh.
To go to 3-1, win himself some store credit here too. What a finish. Wow.
That's wild. I didn't even thought about Apex Dragon. I do not know if there's one thing I learned today. I know nothing about Regidrago V-Star.
And that is okay. There's sometimes some decks you let slip through the cracks. All right, well, excellent game to Connor and Tim. What a finish to that last round today. So like you mentioned, that's going to be the end of it today. We have our 4 rounds of Pokemon TCG, but come next week, we have our first league challenge of the 2023-2024 season. So it is your first chance to come to Nerd Rage Gaming and earn some championship points to get your invite for next year. And I'll tell you, I will be here. I'll probably be commentating, but we want to get plenty of people out here for the chance to start getting there. And I don't know if you've seen this online, Frank. It looks like the top 8 kicker for local points isn't really a thing anymore. Top 8 points at cups, no matter the number of size, and it looks like similar for challenges. So
That's pretty awesome.
come on out, get some points, get a chance to move on. And regardless of just next week, we have Thursday Night Pokemon every week here at Nerd Rage Gaming. We'd love to have you out. So look forward to talking to you all next time. Frank, thank you for joining for some great commentary here, and we'll see you all next Thursday.